Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this wonderful event this evening. We're going to sing, we're going to hear stories, and we're going to have fun. Teachers College, as you know, is a seedbed for knowledge and for the professions in psychology and other fields. Just a wonderful burst of human and intellectual energy in this place over the last 125 years. And in the field of psychology, not only names like Albert Ellis, but also Rollo May, Edward Thorndike, Carl Rogers, and so forth. I'm not going to take the long version of that, which really goes very deeply into the field of psychology. We are so pleased to be able to honor and pay tribute to a great one, to Albert Ellis this evening. And we're going to be hearing from people who can speak to different dimensions of that. I just want to say one thing as a non-psychologist, as a historian, and part of my interest is in the history of the professions and of the social sciences, that he represents to me a very deep, creative, and ethical presence in the work of psychology, and the work of therapy, and the work of the human services generally. Someone who is not satisfied, who would not accept the limitations of the structures of knowledge and care that he was given and raised and that he was exposed to. He represents a kind of restlessness in looking for deeper insight and maybe broader opportunity for people to grow, much broader, maybe more widely diffused. And it's of great interest to me that flowed not only into cognitive behavior therapy, but also into sexuality, also into thinking about helping people to live lives that could be fulfilled. And so as a non-psychologist, as someone who works as chief academic officer of Teachers College, where I'm very proud of all that our faculty does, it's such a pleasure to be able to have an evening like this where we pay tribute to a great one. I'm going to turn over the podium to my colleague, Professor Lisa Miller, who is in our program in clinical psychology, and she has a few words that she's going to add. Thank you.
Welcome. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Ellis brought this possibility to psychology, that we could co-create our reality, and it was not where we came from or where we sit, but how within ourselves we co-create our possibility. He stood out in his time as unique. And yet, in just a few decades, all of psychology shifted to surround his wisdom. We have an expression here that someone is very TC if they're innovative. And I think we may all agree that Ellis was profoundly innovative from a deep, heartfelt place of possibility. His view that we are foundationally good, that if we can get the story right and bring into resolution with clarity the truth, we are good and the world is good. This on the heels of World War II. The view that the mind is so powerful that it can transform our felt and lived experience. And that indeed, as the poem suggests, we are enormously powerful, we are free. These were extraordinary views in a sea of determinism, a time in which psychology was essentially an operating table upon the psyche, and as the client, we were far more passive. Now, the synthesis of both worlds has come, and I'm delighted that, for instance, in our program and other clinical programs around the country, the legacy of Ellis is taught alongside the legacy of psychodynamic work. Together, our therapists integrate these ideas. I want to lead you with one of Ellis's writings in the 90s. This was written in Cognitive and Constructive Psychotherapies, a chapter that he wrote, his final paragraph. He said, "The main future of RET will be, I predict, in its psychoeducational applications. And I hope this kind of usage will be of considerable help to clients who are in therapy, as well as those who are in various kinds of self-help groups. Better yet, perhaps, it will help literally millions of people who never had any form of individual or group treatment to clearly see some of the ways in which they are needlessly disturbing themselves, to work in overcoming their self-constructed, emotional, cognitive, behavioral problems, and to achieve a more self-actualized and self-fulfilled existence." Ellis saw that we are free, and he cared to see the wisdom of what is each and every one of our birthright shared broadly throughout our culture. I think he'd be very pleased to see the grand wake of his work. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Lena Verdeli. I'm on faculty at the clinical psychology program, and I teach psychotherapy, research and practice. This is also Albert Ellis's program. So as I was preparing for this, I took some time to reflect on Ellis's contribution to our field, his field, clinical psychology, but more broadly to the art, science, practice, and teaching of psychotherapy. So I read and hear a lot the word revolution describing. It's a very frequently used word to describe this chain reaction that he set in motion in the 50s. I actually prefer another term. It came from the world of technology, and it's called disruptive innovation. And a disruptive innovation is basically a radical change in the paradigm, radical change in the field that is totally unexpected. It did not evolve linearly from the previous paradigm. For example, a cell phone and landline, right? Very different principle, not linear evolution, and a big, of course, shifting in the field. So Ellis was an indefatigable and very generous teacher, offered the new generation of mental health providers and researchers, many of us among them, some amazing gifts. And I'm going to present you, my thoughts on this. One is he really introduced the language of change. So he was saying that what makes people miserable, not just the life, the events, or other people of the past, but how we make meaning out of this and what we tell ourselves, how we talk to ourselves. So it's this harsh inner critic, the relentless inner critic. It's the voice of our parents, or rather our parents' inner critic, which is the absolute standard, and it feels right. So it becomes our voice, and that's how we talk to ourselves many times. It's us, he said, not the events and others that make us upset and miserable. So, and we continue doing that because we cling to this irrational inner voice. So the therapist's job is really to uncover and challenge these beliefs and reveal how rigid, irrational, absurd, sometimes sadistic, and most frequently pathetic they are. So the therapist does that with humor, with this wonderful, challenging attitude, and with relentless commitment, because the opponent is very strong. People lived with this voice day in and day out for years. He was asking the patient to make a commitment as well. It's to work very hard, day in and day out, to install a new voice, kinder, flexible, and rational. So practice, 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 he used to say. He also practice means to expose yourself to new experiences. And I read how, as a young man, he was very shy, and he exposed himself to the task he assigned himself was to meet 100 women and ask them for a date. He didn't get a date, but he was much more comfortable at the end talking to women. But something that seems initially, contradictory, but if you think about it, makes perfect sense. It's this change in inner voice that leads to acceptance. Self-acceptance, accepting, our human condition with all the frailty and contradictions and absurdity at times and glory. Accept others. Used to say, there is no real reason, if you think about it, why others must like us and treat us fairly. And that doesn't make them bad or good, more worthy or less worthy. And unconditional life acceptance. Things don't always work out. There is no reason why life has to go the way we really want it. In addition to the language of change, he brought another language, the language of empiricism. Empiricism on two levels. One is the usual meaning of, testing the work, submitting the work to a test of randomized controlled trials. There are, REBT has been tested a number of times. Recently, there was actually a big, very interesting trial where one of the few trials where psychotherapy does better than medication in the long run from a Romanian university. But I'm also talking about another level of empiricism in the session. So the patient has to approach himself or herself with curiosity, experiment, collect information, challenge. And he was always, he never shied from the public dialogue and public, discussions about the treatment, the techniques. Always openness and transparency. There is a third thing that stayed with me, and I think with my students. And this is something that sadly we forget a lot these days, and we don't talk about it. And it's the language of freedom and of liberation. We talk more about adjustment, but we don't talk about how to set yourself free. He was a wonderful model of that. He was not an inhibited person. He didn't use sanitized language or processed, thoughts. He was very prolific. There was a title which I love, How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything, Yes, Anything. A number of books. And always, encourage the people to really try to find the courage within themselves, to challenge these deep-seated values and attitudes and beliefs, to dare to challenge them and change them. I actually want to share with you a discussion I had with my students. We are talking about grief work, and one of them brought up this study of nurses, hospice nurses, who documented the things that people say in their deathbed. So they say, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself. And I wish I had let myself be happier. So happiness is not something that comes from others. It's a commitment that we have to make. So his work helped thousands of people, and through his students, even more now, to set people free and happier. Thank you very much.
I want to first thank Provost Tom James and Dr. Lisa Miller, Dr. Lena Verdeli, for your beautiful words and your marvelous description from 3 different angles, but so true and so representative of what you described about Al and his contribution. Thank you so much. Friends, colleagues, guests, and thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm very nearsighted, so I'm squinting, but I think I can see Rosella and Heather and Paulina and Alejandra and whoever helped you organize this historic event. There will not be another 100th birthday celebration for Albert Ellis at Columbia University Teachers College ever again. And thank you, thank you. Wow, and by the way, happy anniversary, Columbia University Teachers College, 125 and looking good. So, I'm going to breathe deep and contain my emotions. No, I'm experiencing them and talking anyway. Albert Ellis, that's him. You know, we were like that. Like, you probably couldn't have fit a hair between us sometimes. Do you know what I mean? We were like a unit. But I digress. Albert Ellis was here. Albert Ellis was here at Columbia University Teachers College for years. And Albert Ellis was here. I feel certain that he sat here in this chapel. Believe me, it wasn't to pray, and it wasn't to beg or pray for forgiveness for his sins. But in all probability, it might have been for him to take in the beauty of this space, to feel the energy of it, to contemplate while sitting here. He was a dreamer, an imaginer, and a thinker, all 3. And if there had been music playing, he would have been here for that. He loved music, certain types of music, and he would immerse himself in it. He would love the type of music that allowed him to contemplate with his mind and which could move his heart and stir his soul. And you know, I feel that for many people, Albert Ellis had that same impact. His theory and his methods and practical tools and approach were clarifying and satisfying and usefully contemplated and then acted upon, along with his emphasis on, as Lena mentioned, unconditional acceptance of self and of others and of life. And his sincerity, his authenticity, his humour, his immense courage whenever faced with adversities, and he had a good number that he faced. His unwavering, vigorous, no-nonsense and tireless dedication to helping as many humans as possible to suffer less emotional misery and to experience happiness more. Albert Ellis touched hearts. He touched hearts and souls, and he helped to greatly enhance lives. So I feel comfortable comparing him to the effect of truly fine music. Al's life was passionately dedicated to others. He did things intensely. He was genius, he was a maverick pioneer, a rare soul whose work and example, as Lena pointed out again, he was a model. He didn't just preach, he practiced what he preached, and he preached what he successfully practiced. So his example really helped countless millions. Now, something that many of you may not know or have known is that for many, many decades, Al kept personal journals. And I'd just like to share with you now only a few lines from a journal, the journal that he kept during, I'm sorry, am I too close? Tell me if I'm sounding horrendously echo. When he was 16, listen to what this 16-year-old wrote. I mean, just a few lines, not the whole journal. So, I would like to be pointed out in the future as one who, like Aristotle and others, advocated great things long before people in general took them seriously. He's 16, and he goes on. The best thing to do in life is not to waste away the hours thinking why you are here, but knowing that you are here to make the best of it and to try to get all the advantages that life can give you with as few disadvantages as possible. He wrote some months later, my doctrine, he's 16, my doctrine is to do away with revenge and to substitute forgiveness as far as is humanly and practically possible. Just a couple more. I believe that by following idealistic impulses and really trying to aid humanity, a person will unconsciously bring himself more happiness than if he should only selfishly devote his life to aiding himself to becoming rich and prosperous. He wanted to write the great American novel from the time he was a child, and he wrote novels that did not get published. From one of these, again, he was around 16. Just a few lines from this novel. What is living? What is dying? Living, you are bound by the limits of your senses. Life is an eternal striving after life. Life has no end, no goal, no aim, but it is the everlasting seeking after something, after life itself, that makes it worthwhile. Continue seeking, continue fighting for a higher satisfaction, for a higher plane of consciousness. In such seeking lies the greatest possibility of human happiness. Albert Ellis, age 16. Amazing. So, as Dr. Miller and Dr. Lena, I forget your last name, I'm sorry, already partly indicated, his REBT approach. So for those of you who don't know, REBT stands for Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, REBT for short. And I just will mention, when he first developed it, it was called RT, Rational Therapy. Soon he stuck the E in for emotions, Rational Emotive Therapy, and in 1993 it became and remains Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, REBT, which is unique among the large realm of cognitive psychology and therapy in a number of ways, including, I believe it's the most holistic of all of the cognitive approaches in that it constantly reminds us of the inseparable interaction of mind, actions, and emotions within each human being. It's unique in its strong philosophical emphasis on practicing compassion and tolerance and unconditional acceptance, which, by the way, were characteristics of the man himself. It's unique in the precision and the vigour it displays when seeking out those irrational beliefs which hurt us. And it's unique in the thoroughness with which it disputes those ideas. It's unique in the fact that a good number of the aspects of REBT were born from the ways which Al creatively and ingeniously developed to enable him to cope with the adversities he had to boldly face from childhood till the end of his life. So I'd like to share some of those with you now, just some, very briefly. But before I do that, by the way, did you know that his first PhD thesis topic here was on the love emotions of college-age females? However, He was made to abandon that dissertation topic by conservative faculty members. So he did another thesis on a safe statistical topic instead, and he successfully earned his PhD. Yes, Rael. Nonetheless, I suspect that my sweetheart continued to do research into his preferred topic throughout his years here. For scientific purposes only, of course. So let me quickly jump through various chapters in his life to show you the ways he overcame adversities, and those ways became part of REBT, which I think makes it such a living approach, not just theoretical. Okay, childhood adversity. He was very ill from infancy onwards and had to spend long periods of time in hospital, sometimes 8 months at a stretch. And he was rarely visited by his busy parents, father, businessman, mother, caring for 2 younger siblings. And so when all the other children in his hospital ward had visitors and he didn't, understandably, he felt very sad, very depressed. And he decided he didn't want to feel that way. And so he actively thought of things he could do to distract himself from thinking about the sad fact that he wasn't being visited by his loved ones. So he read just about every book in the hospital library. He'd talk to other patients and their visitors. He'd dream, he would imagine about things he wanted to do when he grew up. He'd fall in love with all the pretty nurses, even then, and he felt less sad. All this at the ripe old age of 4. And this was to become the cognitive distraction aspect of REBT. So moving on now quickly to adolescent and early adulthood. As Lena mentioned regarding his shyness, Al loved 110 out of 100 girls, but suffered from painful and debilitating shyness. So using the gradual exposure method of John B. Watson and Mary Cover Jones, he pushed himself to do uncomfortably what he wanted to get comfortable at. So he gave himself the homework, as Lena mentioned, of speaking to 100 women during the month of August in the Bronx Botanical Gardens. And of those 100 women, he made one date and she never showed up. But he overcame his fear. And in early college days, he was voted president of a political group, which meant he had to give talks in public. Again, at that time, initially, he was terrified, pushed himself to do uncomfortably what he wanted to get better at. And within a short time, he discovered not only did he lose his fear, but he enjoyed it. And thanks to his lack of fear of public speaking, he helped millions help themselves to change their lives for the better. So those two experiences actually became the in vivo desensitization part of REBT. Moving on to early adulthood. So he fell madly in love with on-again, off-again Carol. He was married to Carol for 18 hours, but that's a long story. They were friends for all of her life. She died in 2001. But so after one particularly romantic night, she walks him to the door and tells him she wants a break. And he feels yet again devastated by her rejection, as he often did. He went near his home to the Bronx Botanical Gardens, even though it was midnight, and he walked around the lake there feeling despondent, the deepest depression. And he had this awareness then, this realization that his misery was not caused by Carol's rejecting him, but by his demanding that she should love him as much as he loved her, or his nutty overgeneralization that he believed so earnestly that he could never be happy without her and only her in his life. And he realized that his depression was caused by his blowing the whole thing out of proportion. He realized at that point, he was only 24, the harm of the tyranny of the shoulds. That's a Karen Horney expression. Shoulds, demands, how they hurt us and created the unhealthy emotions. And from this came another core aspect of REBT, that when we irrationally demand things, as opposed to having healthy desires for them, it is healthy to want what we want, which creates a very different emotion if we don't get it than when we demand that we should or think desperately that we must. I have another journal entry from a few years after that. Am I okay? Oh, good, good, good. And I won't read the whole lot, but let me read just a few parts of it. So Al wrote this in his journal on his 30th birthday. So that was, so today's the 25th of September. On the 27th, in 2 days, was Al's birthday. So 70 years ago, from Friday, Al wrote this. Not all of it, I don't have time to tell you all, but listen, just bits. So, now that I have reached 30, it may do me good to list here just some of my plans for the future to see how many I shall eventually carry out. These include obtain my PhD. Yes, he did it. Here. Write a book on light opera. I'm going to talk really fast now. And light concert music. Write a major work on sexual liberty. Do practical sexual and other counselling. Perhaps some regular psychotherapy. Write a definite work on the psychology of love. Write a truly distinguished novel. Do some kind of revolutionary activity, depending on what is most practical and what is most needed for society to get better. Organise an institute for sexual science. He did that, quad S. Actually, he did most of these things. Sorry for interrupting myself. Write a major work on homosexuality. Experiment and write about the raising of orphans. Write books on several taboo subjects. Publish a good book of comic verse. You're going to be hearing or singing some of his comic verses. Publish intelligent song lyrics. He thought some of the song lyrics to the song of the day were pathetic, so he was going to write new ones. Organise an experimental city for healthy, happy, intelligent living. He didn't get round to that one. Write a book on human happiness. Do a major work on religion, for and against. Organise a system of musical libraries. Organise a group for intelligent individuals called the Intelligentsia. Perform some experiments in musical popularity. He loved music. Have a good many more, make a good many more worthwhile friends, and do many more things which I can't think of right now, but I'll certainly think of doing later. I left out quite a few. He wanted to open an institute for neglected songs. And isn't that cute? I mean, for people to study them, like a library. Anyway, okay. So fast forward to his adult years, his later adult years. So following his graduation from this college and practicing psychoanalysis, which is what he was trained in, with patients, he didn't like that approach very much. His experience of it was that he found that many of his patients clients might have felt better after sessions. You know, they talked, he listened, so forth. But he felt they weren't getting better. They were continuing to think in ways that created unhealthy emotions. They were repeating the same old stuff. And so Al became, within at first the psychodynamic model, more active directive, all the while practicing and developing and writing about his ideas of what was to become REBT. And as he did that, he saw increasing numbers of his clients lessen their unhealthy thinking and behaviours, and therefore preventing further ones and maintaining their therapeutic gains and their greater emotional well-being. When in 1956, at the annual American Psychological Association meeting in Chicago. He first presented his Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy approach, then called Rational Therapy, remember? He was booed, he was cheered. A lot of people hated him. He was called simplistic, he was called superficial, and worse. But his conviction didn't waver, and he continued to research it and apply it and present on it. And now, as we know, the cognitive approach quite dominates our field. And this year, this very year, at the American Psychological Association's annual convention, Al was posthumously awarded the prestigious APA Award for Outstanding Lifetime Contributions to Psychology. He never gave up. He never gave up. So, over the following decades, his work flourished, it thrived. He inspired others who contributed greatly to the field, who developed CBT-CT, ACT, DBT. I'm not doing the alphabet. Those of you who study psychology know what I mean. He had 85 books published, over 1,500 articles published and more. He would work 16 to 18-hour days, 7 days a week. He presented all over the United States, around the world. And he also, as was indicated earlier, loudly and vocally pushed for changes. Very uncomfortable, the things he said at the time. He would push for changes to the uncivil societal attitudes, pushing for equality for women, equality for gays, talking about the 1940s and 1950s, pushing in favour of interracial relationships and interracial marriage, which in some states, I, this naive Australian when I moved here, didn't know that they were banned. They're illegal in those years in some places. And he pushed against censorship and more. So his impact was not only in psychology and therapy, but he really helped change attitudes in society in a very positive and profound way. Fast forwarding to the final years. Al and I first began our friendship when he was in his 70s. Don't let yourself ever believe, or don't let friends of yours ever believe that, oh, it's too late for me to ever find love. It doesn't mean just because he found, well, more love. It's not that he hadn't had love before. But even if one doesn't, one can still have a satisfying life. But a lot of people wrongly think that past a certain age it's impossible, and there's no evidence for that. In any case, we started off our relationship as friends. I lived in Australia, he lived here, but it was a deep, unique, unusual friendship. When he was in his 80s, he began the romantic love relationship with the woman that he called the greatest love of his whole life. That was me. Lucky me. And we experienced very profound joy. But also during his final decade, other things happened. There were some unanticipated and quite shocking to him events in his life. Certain people acted strongly against his goals and wishes, and he felt greater sadness during that time than he had ever felt at any other time in his life. His health was declining, contributed in part by the demands of that situation he was in, and yet he continued to practice what he preached. He hated what was being done, the actions, and he did his best to fight them and change them, but he didn't hate the people who were carrying them out. True unconditional other acceptance. He actually felt compassion for these people. So he succumbed to pneumonia in 2006. At that time, doctors prepared me for his imminent death, as in within days. But he amazed all by surviving another 15 months. He fought to live, though he never again, for those final 15 months, would ever have food or liquid by mouth, everything to a tube. And the effort was so rigorous. He was in hospital, rehab, trying to get better. Then there'd be a relapse, hospital. The final 15 months mostly were hospital rehab. Only in his final few weeks was I able to take him to a home environment, our home environment. But even whilst in the hospital and in the rehab, he would continue to have students and other people visit him, and he would continue to help whoever he could, even from his hospital bed, till only weeks prior to his death on July the 24th, 2007. Just months before his death, he was in the hospital at the time, had just had a relapse. We thought he was getting better. And a group of psychology PhD students from Belgium were in New York, and we had arranged a year ago that they would visit him. We thought in our workplace, but he was in hospital. I said, Al, let's cancel. He said no, so they came to his hospital room. He looked very ill that morning, and I said, Al, let's cancel. He refused. So the group came in his hospital bed. He spoke to them, voice weak, but with the same Ellis. He answered questions. The first question from a student was, Dr. Ellis, we're so honoured to be with you, but Debbie told us how unwell you are. Why didn't you cancel? To which he first replied, so I can continue to teach the gospel according to St. Albert. And then he said, in all seriousness and sincerity, to help each of you understand REBT better, because when you do, and when you apply it, you'll have better and happier lives. And when you do that, you can help many more people more effectively, more of the time, to suffer less misery and to experience more joy. You know, that evening, the doctors told me that blood work done in the morning before the students arrived indicated that that very morning he had suffered a heart attack. The enzymes in the blood showed that, how ill he was, and he refused to cancel. That was his spirit, that was his determination. Well, fast forwarding, during his final weeks when it was clear that his health was not going to improve, his body was a torture chamber. And he saw that he was not going to achieve in his lifetime his wishes regarding the unhappy situation I kind of touched on earlier. He still chose to refuse to allow himself to feel despair or rage. He accepted those grim realities, and each day we focused on what still was good in our lives. The only thing, but what a thing, was the love we had for one another. So I'm about to conclude, before I do, in a moment I'm going to conclude, and then I'm going to introduce the next thing. But before that, if I may, try to stop me. You can try to stop me. I'm going to boldly do something I'm not all that comfortable doing, but I'm going to do it anyway, which is, you don't know what it is yet, which is this. As you're about to discover, I'm no professional singer. And in a little while, we are so lucky that we're going to hear a professional singer sing some of Al's rational, humorous songs. He wrote these verses with humour to help people have a lighter and different perspective on some of the stuff we could make ourselves so heavily upset about. He was so witty. He was extremely funny. I could go on and on, but I won't. Anyway, so the vast majority, as in 99.999% of his songs were funny, were humorous, and some rather bawdy. The language unsanitised, as you put it so well. Don't worry, I won't now, yet. Anyway, But during a particular difficult period in his life, he wrote a song that was very unusual because it wasn't funny, and yet I feel it captures an essential message, not only in his theory, but in the way he lived. And forgive me, I hope it won't hurt your eardrums. Focus on the words if you can, and not my musicality, and I won't stand too close. And it's to the tune of Old Man River, and the song is Just Keep Rolling Along. No. Life is often quite full of trouble. It may not soften, your cares may double, but you can bear it and keep on rolling along. So stop your pining and just accept it. Your constant whining will not correct it. Your insisting and musting just makes frustration more strong. When you mightily complain, you're inviting extra pain. Whine and scream and yell like hell, and you magnify the horror on which you dwell. Life is often quite full of trouble. Just stop your scoffing, that makes it double. So nicely soften and keep on rolling along. So, in conclusion, Al was here. Thank you, Columbia University Teachers College, for contributing to him in a way that helped him contribute so forcefully and beneficially to so many others. Al was here, Al is here. I believe that he's present within your thoughts and feelings that you might have of him right now. If he were physically here, he'd love this, Rosella. And I believe that he would thank you all sincerely and humbly. You know, those of you who heard him or heard of him, his language is rah, 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 rah. He was actually a very humble, gentle soul. Often, a lot of his rah, rah, rah was to stop us thinking rigid, silly thoughts that hurt us. So he would thank us, you all. He would remind us to cherish this gift of life which passes so quickly. He would encourage us to keep practicing the wise and compassionate REBT. He would urge us to help as many other people as possible, not only in our professional life, but in our day-to-day life, whenever we could, to help others. And he would want each one of us to create marvellous and joy-filled lives, despite and including the challenges therein. He'd probably tell us, while smiling that amazing smile, to have a ball. So, happy birthday, our Al. And to each of you, for appreciating him and for being here, for having me here, thank you. Just a few introductory comments. This is a brief video of various clips. Some of them are from earlier times in his life, and some of them you'll see are towards the end. You'll hear it in his voice. Some of them are weeks before he succumbed to the pneumonia. You'll notice he's wearing headphones. That's because of hearing issues, and people would speak into a speaker connected to the headphones. You'll hear in the second half him answer questions. No one knew he was in agonising pain. And yet watch how immersed he is in sharing with others what he shared, so much determined to keep on despite the agony that no one knew he was in. And at the end, you'll see around 12,000 people sing a bit of one of his songs, which we're going to do later too. Thank you so much. So here's Al.
Ask yourself, what do I really want to do with this man to help enjoy him and have him help enjoy me, because that's the basic function of life, enjoyment, which we tend to lose. And you force yourself to take the risk. In the old days, when I first began therapy, I practiced what could be called the sort of eclectic kind of sex therapy and marriage and family therapy, though that didn't almost exist at that time. But I was one of the pioneers in the field, and eclectic psychotherapy. I used to be scared witless of approaching females. What's so bad about encountering females? What are they going to do? Kill me, or in the Freudian sense, castrate me? So I decided that for the next month, every time I saw a woman sitting on the bench alone, I would go up and start a conversation. My goal was to approach at least 100 of them. Whatever happened, happened. If I die, I die. I was going to do this kind of thing. Skinner was wrong because I got zero reinforcement. I made a date with only 1 out of the 100, and she never showed up to the date. So you can see that I got no reinforcement, but amazingly, I got completely over my fear of encountering women. So the homework assignment I'm going to give all of you is you go out in public and do something that you consider shameful, embarrassing, humiliating, and something you normally would not do in public.
I began to read all kinds of people when I was 12, fiction and nonfiction, and Freud was one of the nonfiction. So I read a great deal of his. My opinion of Freud at that point was that he was very much of a genius, but he went all around the mulberry bush and found reasons why people were disturbed which weren't really true. He invented them. I read H.G. Wells and Bertrand Russell and a lot of liberal novelists who had philosophy in it. So I was interested in their stories, but I was also interested in their attitude toward life and how they helped themselves get through difficulties.
I wasn't good enough for anybody else.
Suppose you're not good enough for her. She likes you taller or shorter or more money. How does that prove that you're a no good person?
At that point in my life, I was measuring myself based on my relationship. I invested so much into my relationship that it became my life.
Yeah, you made your relationship the whole of your life. It's only a part of your life. Never the whole, unless you think it is. If I did what you did, I wouldn't finish any books.
Right, that's a good point, yes.
But I write them imperfectly.
Yes.
And they get by, and they still help people, even though they're imperfect.
Well, this is kind of an embarrassing problem because it's a sex problem. Is there any kind of conversation you can recommend when you want to bring the topic up?
Yeah. You say, I'd like to talk about sex.
This practitioner, this woman has a nightmare that there's one more paper for her to write.
There's many more papers. If you don't have to do them perfectly well and don't have to get universal acclaim for them, then as I do at the age of 92, I've written in the last few years 5 new books and 2 I'm working on at present time. So there's many things you can do if you don't think you have to do them marvelously and perfectly well. Some things are bad, a few things are exceptionally bad and kill or harm or control the freedom of millions of people, but it's still not awful. And what's more, no matter how bad it is, you can stand it, you can take it, and not be happy about it. That would be abnormal. But in spite of it, you can lead a happy life. Debbie's family, for example, her mother and father went through the Holocaust, but they got by and still led a happy life, and many other people have. So it's never hopeless, it's never totally bad, it's just exceptionally bad that you are an individual who can cope and sometimes happily cope with exceptionally bad things. So again, nothing is horrible, awful, and terrible, and no matter how bad it is, unless they actually kid you, you can take it and still lead pleasurable and happy existence. People are entitled to be as religious as they want to be and as spiritual as they want to be. But I have shown in the Journal of Individual Psychology, the Adlerian Journal, and in other places here, that if you're rationally spiritual, then you decide to be in favor of and to help other people and to make the world better. And if you're irrationally spiritual and religious, then you can be bigoted and knock down and kill other people. So spirituality and religion they're very good as long as they have quite rational elements in them. My legacy, I hope, is myself and the way I refuse to upset myself when bad things happen. And all the principles of REBT, you largely upset yourself, you can change it, you have choices, and you can choose. USA, unconditional self-acceptance, UOA, unconditional other acceptance, and ULA, unconditional life acceptance. So go work your ass off and choose it.